Hi, how are you doing, Shelby?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Did you have a good
I
weekend?
had a great weekend, thank you. And what about you?
I had a wonderful weekend. We had good weather for a change.
Nice. Likewise here in
Voila.
Portland.
Yeah, okay, so what I thought we would do is talk, as before, in sort of more general terms about language learning and learning of French. And maybe compress that a bit, and then we'll also get into your lessons, and we'll do that also a little bit in a shorter video than before so that we don't end up with too long video.
Great.
So, before we get into the French, I just wanted to share with you some thoughts that I had about what we're doing. So, in a way, what we're doing is a form of a sort of guided instruction. You are exploring French through the mini stories, or through Le Petit Prince, or through songs. You're exploring the language. Together, we're finding things in the language, and we talk about them. Mm-hmm. So, in a sense, we're finding things, we're exploring things. You might ask me a question, or I might point something out to make the language seem less, say, intimidating. Not with the expectation that you'll remember those things. And I think that's a very important point in language learning. It's the gradual exposure and not the attempt to memorize anything. And I was thinking, if we go for 4 weeks, we'll cover 20 mini stories, and we're doing a lot of English speaking. In the next 20 lessons, or next 4 weeks, we'll speak half English, half French, as we continue to explore the language. And then the 4 weeks following that, we will only speak French, barring any, but there should be no need to speak any English. And what we're doing is we're pointing things out, we're sort of noticing certain things, and as we notice certain things, other things become clearer. But always with the idea that it's that continuing exposure to the language, and you're free to explore elsewhere. I want you to do 5 new mini stories each week, review the old ones, and then you can go explore songs or Le Petit Prince or whatever else you want.
Okay.
And so that's kind of my thought. And I was thinking, this is something we can do for French now with you as sort of a trial. But if, say, a person in Brazil wanted to do a guided course in English, where we begin by speaking Portuguese and then slowly Portuguese in English and then only English. We begin with Portuguese explaining things and then Portuguese in English and then only in English. I'd be quite open to having trials of this kind of a guided course with other languages if people are interested. And I should say personally, I've already had exposure now to Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, but I intend to go further east into Urdu. And at that point, if someone who is an Urdu speaker wants to work with me and teach me Urdu in the same guided course pattern, I think that would be interesting to explore.
I think so too. I like the idea. Well, I'm game to do that at least for this French series.
All right. Now, I know that just looking at some of the comments here, that people often ask the question, what do I do when I'm A1, A2? How do I accumulate words when it's all noise to me?
Yeah.
And so part of that is to have this guided period where we reduce the anxiety. And certainly we don't say, here's the structure in this language, you have to memorize that. Or here are these words, you have to memorize that. It's not about memorization. It's about exposing yourself to the language. And slowly, as you notice certain things, and certain things suddenly start to stick, then you start noticing other things. Mm-hmm. The fog gradually lifts. So, I don't know, you've probably had some of the same questions where people are so concerned, I don't know anything, how can I start? I don't, understand anything. That's what LingQ is for.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think a big question that a lot of people have, especially when they're beginners, like myself in French, is, how do I make that push from A1 or A2 to the next level, to an intermediate level? Because even if I have some words, some phrases, some understanding of the grammar, I'm barely able to put together a sentence, and I don't know how those gaps are going to get filled in, and I don't feel like I'm retaining all the vocabulary that I'm learning. So how would you answer a question like that?
Well, I think that one shouldn't be too concerned about being able to use the language. Like, people think if I don't use it, I'll forget it. I don't believe that. I think that it takes that repeated exposure to the language, the brain starts to get used to the language. At some point, you will either want to or have an opportunity or a need to start using it, and of course you will struggle. But if you have a solid base in terms of vocabulary and comprehension, you will develop that ability to use it. So it's pointless to fret and worry about how you're going to ever be able to remember those words in order to be able to use them. Just continue enjoying the sort of, discovery of the language. And believe me, because I've done it many times, believe me, you will, when the time comes, you'll gradually start to use more and more of it. You don't have to deliberately memorize. You don't have to study word lists. You don't have to do any of those things. You just have to keep on pushing, hopefully in an enjoyable, process of discovery and exploration, and the brain will get used to the language.
And I think that we can trust you because this is the exact same method that you've used to learn almost 20 languages, right?
Well, that's right. And if I look at your situation learning French, and I don't notice that you have a particular level of anxiety, but a lot of people are concerned, like, how will I ever learn this language? So someone going from, say, English to French has a big advantage. It's the same writing system. It's 50% same vocabulary between English and French. And in your case, you have Spanish, so that's like 85% the same vocabulary. Mm-hmm. But when I started learning, Greek or Persian or Arabic, I mean, it's not the same writing system. There's essentially no common vocabulary. So it was much more difficult. It was much more total noise. And yet, and I thought, I'll never learn this language. I'll never learn to read it and to understand it when I'm listening to it. And the brain gradually does. You just have to keep going. And I think the mini stories, because there's so much repetition, and because you have, with LingQ, you can look up the words. In fact, you also have the translation if you're confused. You have the translations per sentence. You can hear it in the natural voice per sentence. And you just have to keep doing the same thing and listen more than once. And so go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to 1. And so here I'm suggesting we're going to go, in fact, now into lesson 11 of the mini stories. But I'm hoping you'll continue to review the earlier ones, do the next 5 mini stories, and continue to explore, wherever else you're interested. So maybe we should do that. Maybe we should move into the mini stories.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, and I think for the time being, if I'm in a new language, a difficult language, one that I'm sort of A1, A2, I always use sentence view.
Right. That's really good advice too.
Yeah.
Straight from the guru.
Well, it's just anything you can do to make it easy is good in language learning. So, like bilingual dictionaries. I only use bilingual dictionaries. I don't want to be struggling looking at a meaning written in the target language where I don't know half the words. So we get the translation in our language, and we can listen to it.
Yes, for sure.
So why don't you try reading the sentence?
L'appartement de Benoit est trop petit.
Okay, so it's l'appartement.
L'appartement.
So you have to, it's going to take you a long time to get rid of your Spanish training, okay? It's just, that's just how it is. It's just, I can tell you, habits carry over from one language to another, and they're very difficult to get rid of.
Yes.
And for example, when I learned the Russian, Cyrillic alphabet, where P is pronounced R, I mean, 6 months in, I would see the P and I would go P.
Yeah.
So it's just, you can't expect habits to disappear. So, but let's try again. Read the sentence again.
Okay. L'appartement de Benoit est trop petit.
Perfect. You even said petit, whereas your Spanish tendency would be to say petit, but of course it's petit. And Benoit, you got that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's a name. And there was someone who also asked, how do we decide between ignoring a word and not ignoring it in LingQ? And so I just ignored that word because it was a name. And again, you're going to want to do this the way that it works best for you. There's no hard and fast rule. So I've been ignoring proper nouns only, but I'm like, for example, I would save l'appartement and probably just appartement without the L apostrophe as well, because that's my preference, because I want to know how to say them both ways. But I don't know if you have a different way that you would.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the statistics are for the use of the learner. They are yours. They are not for bragging to other people, because every form of the word is different. Some people may choose to save names, or they say by mistake save a name. It really doesn't matter. It's entirely for your own use. I'll tell you, I tend not to save names. And the statistics are for our own use. And as you spend more time on Link, you can go to your profile, and you can see the historical record of what you have done in the language, which is kind of fun. And no one else is coming to my profile. I'm the only one going to my profile, and I can see how many words I've learned, how much I listened, and I can see it historically back over 6 months, back over 2 years. So exactly. Yeah, the statistics are for yourself. But they are motivating, because it indicates that when you're in the sort of doldrums, or you have the feeling you're not getting anywhere, you can look at the statistics and see that in fact you are. You've learned more words.
Yeah, exactly. So make it yours. I think that's what's great about Link, is that it's so customizable in so many different ways, and the stats are one of them. So make it work for you. All right, next page.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Il veut emménager dans un appartement plus grand.
Very good. Very good. So, I mean, I'm more familiar with the word déménager, which is to move away. Okay. Emménager is to move in.
Emménager.
I don't think that's a very high frequency verb, but it doesn't really matter. It starts to make you familiar with the sense of déménager, emménager. And ménage, you know the word ménage? Have you heard of ménage?
No, I'm thinking eat, but that's manger.
That's manger, no. Ménage, so they talk about ménage à trois. Have you heard of that term?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So ménage is like a home, is like something along those. So the word déménager, emménager, it comes up. So you start to become familiar with that word. But the word emménager in itself is not super high frequency, but it doesn't matter. You can't just deliberately try to learn all the high frequency words.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and that's why I see this one only comes with one coin. The more common words have come with more coins, and I like that as a good way, like a good rule of thumb for me. When I'm like, am I going to use this? Sometimes I just look at how many coins are associated with it.
I do the same. But if you're listening to the story many times, as you're supposed to, this will become part of you'll understand. You have to understand the text. So you may not maybe recognize that word immediately, but you'll be understanding the text.
Sure.
So, and are you going to save appartement this time, or are you going to take it as a known?
I know this.
Yeah, you know it. Okay, and read the sentence again.
Il veut emménager dans un appartement plus grand.
Very good. Il veut. That sound is very important. Okay. And you'll notice that contrary to some situations, the T doesn't carry over. Right. And I don't know what the rule is, but sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Kalta, so I don't know. Maybe mostly the T doesn't, but I can't remember for sure.
I haven't been listening to the mini stories as much this last week as I should have been, but listening to the music, I think, has been really helpful, just because you get used to those like very tiny things like that, you know? Right. And I know sometimes someone commented music isn't the best way to learn because sometimes it's like not proper language, but at the same time, I like to learn the way people still play with the language. You know what I mean? Like, we don't always speak proper formal English in everyday use because we're native speakers. So you get to learn like proper stuff in mini stories and other texts. And then you can also learn informal ways to use the language too, which I think is interesting. Maybe other people don't.
I mean, my view of the mini stories is that they're the core. That's like I don't know if you go and work out at the gym or anything, but you have your core exercises. You want to build up basically your core, right? That's very good for you in terms of any physical activity. So I see the mini stories as the core, and then you go out and explore and do other stuff. And the exploring is fun and brings in other things that you notice. Anyway, let us see here.
All right. Il regarde des photos d'appartements sur Internet.
Okay, so il regarde. Say
Il
that.
regarde. Il regarde.
Regarde. Like, make sure if you're going to pronounce the E at the end, it's an E.
Il regarde.
Voilà. Or it disappears. The E is almost like a non-sound, right?
Right.
Il regarde des photos.
Des photos.
So one of the interesting things about des, and again, I'm not saying this so that you'll remember it, but it's just a suggestion. Des has the meaning of some.
Right.
So he looks at pictures. Of course, in English, pictures means some pictures, right?
Yeah.
In fact, it's not the pictures.
Right.
It's some. So des often, we'll see it often where it definitely has the meaning of some. So il regarde des photos. All right. And photographs. But what happens if you say des photos?
If
you make the phrase des photos.
Oh. Like, what's the translation?
What do they give you? Oh, pictures. Okay. Des photos. Yeah, I would have put the meaning as some pictures. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, and I noticed that in French, you'll like the de will come before nouns in ways that you wouldn't insert that in English. Like,
right.
Like you said, like if I say like he looks at photos, you don't need to say like he looks at some photos. You could, but like it's just not necessary. And I don't know what the rule is, but it seems to me like there is a rule in French where in some cases you have to use the de before the noun because I see it used in many, many cases. Is that right?
The de and the de is involved with quantity in a way that I can't tell you any rule, but you know, it's beaucoup de.
Yeah.
You know, many, beaucoup de photos, many photos in English. So the de is in there for quantity. It's just something to think about. It's going to come up again, and eventually, without knowing the rule, you'll start to get used to it.
Cool.
Photo d'appartement. So are you going to save that again, or are you just going to know it?
I'm going to know it.
I think so. Okay.
You want to do one more?
Sure.
All right. The word appartement has come up in like 5 different forms.
But a lot of, you know, not that that's a difficult word, but a lot of stuff does repeat in the many stories. And we're not even going into the second version where here is il, he does this, that, and the other. The next version is I, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then we have the question. So all the stuff repeats about 5 times in the mini stories. That's why they're so good to listen to over and over again, read more than once. And that's how the fog lifts, because the brain starts to form some sense of how the language works. Anyway, let's read this.
Absolutely. All right. L'une des appartements est vraiment bon marché.
Bon marché.
Bon marché.
Okay. Voilà. So you got to hear, it's of course l'un des appartements. L'un, one of the apartments. Because anytime a word ends, here's a rule. Anything that ends in ENT is masculine.
Really? Oh, okay. I hadn't.
There may be exceptions. I don't know of any exceptions, but there could be some. And and what you got to think of is, how do you say apartment in Spanish?
Departamento.
Well, or apartamento. Is it departamento? Maybe it is. Sure.
Living in Chile, that's how people choose departamento.
I think you're right. Often I find that in French, the gender is not so obvious. Where, for example, the word vocabulaire, is that masculine or feminine? Vocabulary, right? Vocabulaire.
I'm going to guess masculine.
Right. How do you say vocabulary in Spanish?
Vocabulario.
Okay. So whenever I'm in doubt, I think of the Spanish word.
Okay.
Because in Spanish, you get the O, so it's very likely to be masculine. Whereas in French now, vocabulaire ends in E. Lots of words that end in E are feminine. So it's not obvious. But if you think of the Spanish equivalent, you'll know whether it's masculine or feminine. So, but that doesn't help people. That doesn't help people who don't speak Spanish. Now, l'un des appartements. So read the thing again.
L'un des appartements est vraiment...
L'un. I don't want to hear the N at all. It's just total nasal.
You don't want to hear the N? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
L'un.
L'un.
Okay.
L'or des l'or des appartements est vraiment bon marché.
Perfect. L'un des appartements est vraiment bon marché. And what else was I going to say? Yeah, bon marché is one of these terms. It means cheap, right? Good market. Okay, it's just that's what it means. It doesn't mean good market. It means inexpensive.
Yeah, I saved that phrase.
So, I mean, the fact that it's difficult sometimes with the nasal, as I say always, the u, and the nasals are hard. And as in so much in language learning, you know, whatever seems difficult in week 3 is easy by week, 15. So people get frustrated because they can't nail things early on. They can't remember things. They don't understand things. And I can tell you, having done it in languages as strange as Persian and Arabic, you just have to continue. And so because I'm saying you just have to continue, I suggest we stop now.
Perfect.
Okay. And so the point in these is not to explain the whole language and give people a bunch of rules to memorize. In our guided course, the first 4 weeks are just to sort of de-stress the situation. Make you notice a few things. Don't expect you to learn any rules. Don't expect you to learn any vocabulary. You continue to work your way through the mini stories or through your songs or whatever else you're exploring. And you'll just see that naturally things become easier. And then in the second 4 weeks, we're going to start speaking some French. And as I say again, if there are people out there who want to do this for their English, using Portuguese as an example, please let me know. And I'm not yet started on my Urdu, but down the road I will be. And I'd be looking for someone to help me on Urdu when we get Urdu at LingQ. But if there are people, Arabic or Persian speakers, who want to help me walk through some of my very difficult texts from Al Jazeera, where I've had them transcribed, we could do some guided courses in that way as well. So it's something that I want to explore as a companion to LingQ.
Great. Well, we'll be watching the YouTube comments for anyone interested.
Okay. Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.